When you started your baseball career, did you ever dream you'd be wearing the uniform of 4 different New York teams?
I realized after 10 years of age that they had major league clubs, and I certainly wanted to get to New York, but I never thought I'd be so successful that I'd go through 3 major league clubs and have a fair career, or the clubs did, and then get to the 4th. And I hope this grows faster than the other 3.
The brand new National League New Yorkers, named the Metropolitans after a long-forgotten 19th century club, had the oldest manager in baseball, Casey Stengel. It's a great honor for me, Stengel said at his first press conference, to be joining the Knickerbockers. The Mets Stadium was old too, the Polo Grounds, deserted by the Giants and just a year away from the Wreckers Ball. Casey Stengel held court in John McGraw's old office. "Come and see my amazing Mets," he told one reporter. "I've been in this game 100 years, but I see new ways to lose I never knew existed before."
Every pitcher here that's down here has an opportunity to be one of the 10 pitchers, and in other words, we have to find the first 5 or 6 starting pitchers that are going to be on the New York Mets. So look at that opportunity.
His players were a motley mix of veterans cast off by established teams and raw newcomers without much potential. Stengel got a catcher from the Cleveland Indians named Harry Cheety in exchange for a player to be named later. Cheety proved so incompetent that he was returned to Cleveland 30 days later, the first man in baseball history ever to be traded for himself. Stengel eventually settled upon Choo Choo Coleman, who was not much better. A broadcaster once asked him, "Tell us about your wife. What's her name and what's she like?" "Her name is Mrs. Coleman," the catcher said, "and she likes me."
If you join the Mets, you'll get rapid advances, because we had a farm system last year and very little produced.
The Mets fans found in first baseman Marvin Throneberry the best-loved symbol of their team's spectacular ineptitude. Marvelous Marv was marvelous at nothing. He dropped the ball, bungled on the bases. Once he managed to hit a triple but was called out for failing to touch first. When Stengel stormed out to argue, the umpire said, "I hate to tell you this, Casey, but he missed second base too." Having Marv Throneberry play for your team, wrote the sports writer Jimmy Breslin, is like having Willie Sutton work for your bank.
My favorite Met story is about their shortstop, Elio Chacon, who was eager but not very talented, and kept running into the outfield and knocking down Richie Ashburn as he was about to catch a fly ball. And he didn't speak any English, and so somebody, Joe Christopher, went to him and tried to explain this. And then he went to Richie Ashburn. He said, "If you're going to catch a fly ball," he said, "and you see Chacon coming out, what you want to say is, 'Yo la tengo, I've got it.'" And then I've told him, and he'll pull up. So Richie practiced. He said, "Yo la tengo," and game came along, and the situation was a fly ball. He looked up for the fly ball. Chacon rushed out for him. Richie said, yo la tengo," and put his hands up, and he was knocked flat by Frank Thomas, his left fielder. That was the Mets.
The worse the Mets played, the better the New York fans, deprived of their Giants and Dodgers, seemed to like them. Purists objected to the banners they began to bring to the game. Stengel didn't mind. If a banner got in your way, he said, you didn't mind missing a play because it was something bad happening anyway.
Why, they're the most amazing fans that I've ever seen in baseball. I've been in World Series games. I've played before 96,000, but the Mets, I'll have to say, they stick by you. They stick by you in the hotels. They're on the streets. They're carrying placards. They're going through the place. You can find them over here in right field. 4 innings later, if you get a base hit, they'll be over on the left field line. They make up wonderful placards. The placards are terrific. I even have to stop and look at them. I think I made 15 mistakes this year reading the placards instead of watching the pitcher or watching the hitter to take my men out.
The Mets ended their first season with a record of 40 wins and 120 losses, the worst record in the 20th century. They would stay in the cellar for 5 more seasons, but they consistently drew more fans than the New York Yankees.
An amazing thing happened, which was that New York took this losing team to its bosom. Everybody thinks New York only cares about champions, but we cared about the Mets. And I remember going to some games in June that year, and they were getting walloped. They were getting horribly beaten. But the crowds came out to the Polo Grounds in great numbers. And people brought horns and blew these horns. And after a while, I realized that this was probably antimatter to the Yankees, who were across the river and had won so long. And winning is not a whole lot of fun if it goes on. But the Mets were human. And that horn, I began to realize, was blowing for me, because there's more Met than Yankee in all of us. What we experience day to day in our lives is there's much more losing than winning, which is why we love the Mets.